Thank you, Steve. First of all, I want to tell you how honored I am to be here today, speaking to a group of people that are not only Americans, but also from the many parts of our hemisphere south of our border. It is a real treat to be able to share some thoughts with you as well. There is a place in Des Moines, Iowa called the U.S. Center for Citizen Diplomacy. And we've been quoting and talking today about the various presidents of our country, and I'm going to give you a little piece of history about one that we haven't mentioned yet. But on September 11, 1956, President Dwight D. Eisenhower walked across the lawn over to the Red Cross building and addressed some 250, 270 Americans who ranged all the way from Eugene Ormandy of the Philadelphia Orchestra to the president and chairman of the board of GE and everything in between. And he came to them and for 10 minutes made a very interesting address. And he said, I have asked you to come here today because I know there is another way than war. And I'm going to ask your help. And at a very short moment, he said a few more words. The speech is superb. But I'm going to read just one small quote from it. And then I'm going to also share a quote that Secretary Hillary Clinton just said a week ago. He said on that day, if we are going to take advantage of the assumption that all people want peace, then the problem is for the people to get together and to leap governments, if necessary, to evade governments, to work out not one method, but thousands of methods by which people can gradually learn a little bit more of one another. A very recent quote from just last week when Secretary Clinton made a speech, and she said, diplomacy requires substantial people-to-people contact in which we try to reach people through governments, around governments, and under governments, which I thought was unique, in every way possible. Now, I'm not sure if Secretary Clinton had read Eisenhower's speech, but I certainly was struck by the interesting similarity. And I think out of that 53-year ago launching, if you will, which, by the way, at that point, that really did, it was kind of a launch and a kicking point for the establishment, frankly, of Sister Cities International, Project Hope, People to People, which today, of course, is based in Kansas City, and it's run by Mary Eisenhower, Eisenhower's granddaughter. And over time, 53 years, we have developed in this country a fascinating infrastructure, for lack of a better word, of non-governmental organizations that are devoted in one way or the other to some kind of international activity that Americans can participate in. And they range in a wide variety of sectors, almost reflecting in some ways the kind of audience that came to Eisenhower's first meeting. And they also engage Americans from age 5 to 95. And they cover everything from sports to religion to culture to international service to K through 12 to higher education, and there are more. And of course, not to say the least, the business world. And so it was out of that understanding that was brought about by a number of meetings of experts in international affairs that have occurred over the last 2 to 3 years in the United States, leading up to the presidential election, that really the birth, if you will, of the U.S. Center came, into being. And it came into being because there was a recognition that at this point in time in our history, we really don't have until hopefully now, one single entity that can sort of gather together and bring together a kind of national resource base, if you will, of all of the opportunities for Americans to be involved in some kind of international activity, whether at home or abroad. And that really then defines the term citizen diplomats. One can be a genuine, important citizen diplomat if in fact you entertain international students into your home at Thanksgiving when a group of them have no other place to go. You can truly be a wonderful citizen diplomat if your teacher at the 3rd grade level decides that in fact raising pennies for peace, for efforts to build schools through Greg Mortenson's efforts, 3 Cups of Tea, if you have not read it, in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and decide to do that and contribute to helping those schools get built, then you certainly are, as a 3rd grader, a citizen diplomat. The challenge in all of this is to raise, I think, the mindset of the American public to what it means today to be not only an American citizen, but in fact a global citizen. The definition of citizenship in this country today can no longer be within the borders of our own country. It must in fact be an obligation both within and to the rest of the world. And as not only a single entity going out, as has been earlier mentioned, but only, and I say only, in collaboration with our other world partners. So if you really want to address as a country not only the concerns that our country has, but at the same time you are addressing, frankly, what's going to save the world, you then need to be, we all need to be, no matter where we live, but certainly in this country, addressing the concerns of the environment, reducing poverty and disease, increasing respect for human rights, creating a globally competent society, and we have a ways to go on that one, breaking up cultural stereotypes, and achieving food security. So those are, if we do that here, we're also doing it for the rest of the world. And so domestic and international doesn't really get separated, and it really shouldn't, anymore. And so coming back to, to the U.S. Center, the center is only barely, not quite, 3 years old, but it has come about from the grassroots, meetings held all over the country, several leadership gatherings, and out of it a recognition that we know we have to look at ourselves as Americans, but also today as global citizens, and it doesn't make any difference what age you are, and it doesn't make any difference where you come from or what part of the country you live in. So you've got to add that to being an American. One more minute. One of the big projects right now that the center is engaged in is developing and executing a national summit on citizen diplomacy. In other words, the 21st century version of what President Eisenhower did 53 years ago. And the management structure for all of that is in place, and I am extremely pleased, to tell you that, of course, some of the stars in this effort that have been very supportive are the members of the Building Bridges Coalition. They're fabulous and have worked with us all along the way. The summit itself now has the both verbal and actual staff assignment support from the State Department, from Undersecretary Judith McHale's office. We are told very verbally and clearly that Secretary Clinton is completely behind this. And in fact, what we are now negotiating and working toward is holding the summit in November of 2010. So with that, I will point out to you, there's a 2-page brief explanation of what the summit is all about. It's a handout for you. I also prepared what we call the footprint of America around the world. It's some statistics and some numbers that might interest you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have after we're done. Thank you.